Hey, I'm glad to be back. Like I said, for those of you, if this is your first time joining us, my name is Ben, and I have the privilege of getting to lead this thing we call The Return. And for those of you that have been around for a while, what we're going to be jumping into tonight. But I just got to say, I missed you guys last week. I really did. And some of you, you're like, you probably didn't miss me. And you're probably right. But for the most part, I missed you guys. And I know grilling and chilling, it sounds like it went pretty well. There was a lot of gnats. Does anyone know what was happening with the gnats? They were in the grass. And then they just kind of, they came everywhere. Well, I had the distinct privilege of getting to go to CIY Move in Holland, Michigan with the Rising, and even the more specific privilege of getting to hang out with all of the graduates, who many of them are here with us tonight. And so for me, that did my heart good. And I would say this, be encouraged. For those of you guys that don't know much about what's happening over in the Rising, there's some beautiful stuff unfolding in the lives of the young people of this church. And for many of us, we get a front row seat to what God's doing. And so it's a privilege. But I got to see a quick highlight reel of grilling and chilling. So can we play that, Nathaniel? Hey, Nathaniel, can we play that? Wait for it. Oh, man. Oh, got it. Yep. Oh! Hold on, though. Time out. Keep it rolling. Okay. But here, watch this. Colton's like, yeah, I don't even know. He's like, I had nothing to do with it. But look at all that back here. I don't know if you can see that, the high resolution, but bam. Okay. So, but Austin, you good? Your face looks all right. So we're good. All right. You what? Oh, that would have been great to make him blow. We only blow up Shockley. So some of you are walking a fine line. But no. Well, I tell you, it's good to be back in here. And this is kind of unique because we're only going to be in here tonight before we're kind of out of here for a couple more weeks. Next week is Holiday World, and I hope you guys come live the dream with us. We're just going to go on kind of a field trip. It's kind of like Canoe the Blue, only without canoes and the Blue River. It's just roller coasters, right? And somehow, some way, at the end of the day, you can arrive at, hey, we can be friends, all right? You know, you hang out with people and you have fun like that. And so that's what's happening next week. But the following week is Night of Worship. And like Maddie and Shockley said, there's sign up in the back. One of the things that's going to be happening down there for Night of Worship is the opportunity to serve a bunch of people. And I would love to see an army of us from the Return in our Return shirts serving people. We're going to have needs to pick up some trash, to greet some people, some point people in the direction of where things are happening if they can't hear the sound of it. But even serving people with handing out free water and stuff like that. And so there's tons of ways. And so if you got questions, you want to jump in on that, awesome. But we won't be back in here until July 29th. And so if you come next week and we're not here, we will catch it on the security cam, and then we will then show it on the 29th, because we'll ask you, were you actually here? Did you show up? And you'll be like, no, it wasn't. And then we'll play the video of you walking up to the door, reading the sign that says we're living the dream at Holiday World, and we'll film you walking out. That's the way the security cameras work around here. So, but hopefully you can be with us for that. But tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to wrap up our portion of this series that we've been walking through as a church called Sweet Emotions, just taking a closer look at the emotional profile of God, okay? That if we're going to take a look at the emotional profile, that means we're taking a look at his heart, about his character, about God's wiring and what that means for us. And so it means we've been hanging out in Genesis, and if we remember, one of the phrases that we've been trying to repeat is this, that because the reason why it's worth digging in on is because our emotional health, it impacts, it dictates, and it reflects our spiritual health. And so if we are an emotional train wreck, well, then we're oftentimes a spiritual train wreck, okay? It's reflective. Those things hold hands very closely. And so just to recap quickly, a few weeks back, we were talking a lot about joy. We were talking about the joy that comes from creation, that God takes delight in his creation. He takes delight in his son, whom he brought forth creation through, and he takes delight in you. And because you're part of creation, but he made you in his image. And so there's something unique about that delight that he takes in you. And so we spent time talking about that. We spent some time a few weeks ago, talking about how vital the peace in our heart is for us to be able to find rest, that man is not made for Sabbath, but Sabbath is made for man, that resting is a part of it. And when God got done making things happen, he took time to just rest and be still. And what it reflects is, for us, is like when there's no internal conflict, it's really hard to rest, right? If there's not peace in our hearts. If there's conflict going on here, we don't know how to unplug. We don't know how to like calm our nerves and our anxieties. We don't know how to. And so we also spent some time a couple weeks ago talking about the compassionate consequences of God, his integrity, that God keeps his word, and that because God desires to be in right relationship with us, that means that he sets boundaries for us so that we can be in right relationship with him. He desires us to be set apart, to be holy, to be in relationship with him. And that means there's things that are just out of bounds, not because he wants our lives to be miserable, but because he wants our lives to be the best that they can be in relationship with him. And his integrity, driven by his delight in us, it shines through in those moments where, consequences happen for our choices, for our actions. He allows those consequences, but he also shows compassion through them, and he offers redemption. And that really is our story, right? I mean, that's kind of who we are. You'll hear me say this often, that we are a collection of remarkably imperfect people. Remarkably imperfect. Fumbling through following Jesus, learning how to live in grace. That's our story, that we want that right relationship with him, and we're oftentimes a train wreck. But to be in right relationship with him means to step into that and allow those consequences to happen, but that redemption to come. And so tonight, what we're going to spend some time talking about is the vulnerability of God. Because if we're going to be in relationship with someone, specifically with him, and if he's going to be in relationship with his creation that he loves, that he takes delight in, well, that requires vulnerability. And so for those of you who know this, I always throw this out. Give me a definition. What does it mean to be vulnerable? Open. Giving someone the opportunity to hurt you, but trusting that they won't. Okay? Anybody else? To be unprotected. Transparent. Okay. Vulnerability is allowing yourself to be injured, to be open to injury, to be open to wounds. Now, it can be in some terms of, well, like, do you ever think of the game, you guys ever play the game Risk? Right? You remember? Or Stratego? That's probably too old. I knew I'd get Brad with Stratego. He's like, yes, Stratego. But Risk, man, like, you go and you fortify one side of your continent because you're doing everything you can to take over that continent. And as soon as you like build the courage to go after somebody else's continent so that they don't get all their little army guys the next turn if they cash in their cards, right? Never played this, right? You following me? And then what happens? The person, the other player who's just kind of hanging out, letting you guys fight, sneaks in behind and sweeps your whole continent because all you've got is one little army guy in each country. That's why I always go for Australia, okay? It's the key to the game, Australia. So that's one way of looking at vulnerability, but if you think about it as you're being open, like emotionally, you're allowing intentionally to actively choose to be vulnerable, you are actively choosing to let your guard down. It's allowing yourself to be hurt, not always necessarily because you trust them. Sometimes it is. But to be vulnerable means that you're allowing injury to happen. You're open to being wounded. It's like building the courage to tell someone that you love them, and there is at least a chance that A, they don't love you, okay, right? maybe already hitting a nerve. B, they just want to be friends, right? Which we all know what that means. Or C, they're mildly creeped out by you, or completely creeped out by you. You're like, I'm stuck on C. I've totally, Or D, they're just absolutely repulsed by you, okay? Yeah, right? I mean, those are options. I'm not saying that that's what I hope for or necessarily that's where you've been. But if you think about it, like, it's building the courage to maybe say that, but you're putting yourself out there on a limb, and you don't know if you're going to fall off of it or not. I think back, those are vulnerable moments. I think back to the winter of 1998, okay? You're like, yeah, I don't even remember that. I know, I'm older than you, it turns out, okay? The winter of 1998, sitting with a young lady in a 1997 purple Escort, God forgive her mother, little Indian gal, and building the nerve, the courage. And some of you've heard me share the story about when I built the courage to ask this gal out on a date, and I'd scripted the whole thing, and I spent all this time, and then I go to actually ask her out on a date if she would go to dinner with me, and I was like hooked on phonics, and it was like, and words were not coming out of my mouth, and I had spent so much time scripting this, and she didn't help me at all. Like, she just let me fumble through these words and sounds that weren't even making sense come out of my mouth. And she's just like, okay. And she said yes. And we went to Toys R Us, and it worked out pretty great, okay? Which is a great first date idea. Don't even think twice about it being a bad idea, okay? But 1998, in the winter, I'd built the courage. It was a very similar situation where I'd built the courage, where I knew that I loved this woman, and I wanted to tell her. But I also knew all those anxieties, those fears that bundle up inside you that are like, like, I hope it comes out of my mouth right. And I hope she knows what to say right after. And I remember saying, Crystal, I love you. Oh, right? And then I remember this. Do you hear that silence? Oh, man, it was tough. I'm like, oh, no. And if you've ever watched Arrested Development, it's that I've made a huge mistake moment. No. Turns out she had the hots for me. She liked me. She loved me. No, she loved me. She just wasn't ready to tell me yet. And she wanted her own moment to tell me. But in the moment, I'm like, oh, no. I've just tanked this whole thing because I just took it to a 10. You know what I'm saying? But it's in those moments where we feel vulnerable. We feel vulnerable because we're putting our heart out there on the line. It's like when songwriters, when people ever give you a hard time about wearing your heart on your sleeve, and they're like, man, you're always so sensitive. Well, you know what? For songwriters, the reason why we wear a heart on our sleeve is because otherwise you wouldn't have songs to listen to on the radio, okay? Because that's the way it happens. You wear your heart on your sleeve, it gets crushed, and you write a killer song about it, and everybody wants to sing the song, okay? Like, that's the way it works. I think about, as a dad, I think about holding my babies. I think about holding my children, knowing full well that someday, Ezra or Kala or Lila, they're not going to think Daddy's that awesome. They're not going to think I'm cool. They're not going to think I know what I'm talking about. And they're probably going to have this idea that they're smarter than me, and maybe they will end up being smarter than me, but they will be convinced that they know better. And suddenly, I will fall from my place of significance, and I recognize that. That's vulnerability. And at the same time, it doesn't change at all the way I feel about them. Not at all. And that's why I learn more theology from my little nuggets than anyone else, because they teach me how God feels about me. Because there have been way too many times that my heart has been rebellious, okay? Where I was disrespectful and I wanted to do my own thing. And it didn't change the way he felt about me, and he reminds me daily when I get to hold my children. That's vulnerability. That's what it means to be vulnerable. And there is a difference between vulnerability and transparency. Transparency happens within the context of vulnerability, but here's what often happens. We exchange them like they're the same thing. You could be a complainer. You could be a complete turd and just be saying all kinds of things and be super critical and like just a sour face, right? And just be critical of everything. And that's actually being transparent. But it's not being vulnerable. It's not allowing your guard to be down to be open to injury because the walls have been built up. There's a difference there. Well, God makes himself vulnerable. And that leads to defining moments. And in Scripture, you'll see tons of them. But I think I'm pretty sure I believe this, that if you're not ready to be hurt, you may not be ready to love. Because I don't know if love will mean the same thing if you're not ready for your heart to be hurt. And I'm not saying you go looking for it. Don't go looking for somebody to rip your heart out and smash it. But if you're not vulnerable with somebody, I don't know that you can fall in love. I just don't know. I don't think so. But those are defining moments, and they lead us to the kind of the moments of like, okay, where do we go from here? What now? Like what should happen next? And something that Nate said this weekend that resonated with me was that we kind of react one of four ways. And really it's this. Sometimes we'll give it time and we'll think like, oh, if I just give it time, it'll all work out. No, it doesn't work out if you give it time. It doesn't. Time is a concealer. It's not a healer, okay? When you just conceal things and you give time and act like it didn't happen, that doesn't work. Or sometimes what we'll do is we'll try and escape it. We'll try and run from it. We'll try and act like it didn't happen. And we miss the moments to see God working because we're running from the moment. Or sometimes we're just like, well, it is what it is. And we're apathetic. And I don't mean the come what may, it is what it is. I mean it's the, well, I don't know. So I'm going to just pout about it, right? That's taken on an apathetic posture. Or the fourth option is this. You embrace the moment. You engage the moment. And you step into what God may do in and through you through those moments. Because you've allowed him that room. You've actually made yourself available for him to work through you. And there's a connection there between availability and vulnerability. To be available in the moment, it means that you're able to be used. You're making yourself open to be used, accessible to someone else. And so if you're going to exchange words, think of it this way. Vulnerability is actually availability. If you're going to be open to injury and let your guard down, you got to be present. You got to be available. And if we look at some of the moments in Genesis, we can see God's vulnerability. We can see his vulnerability in relationship with us and his availability. And we're not going to spend all kinds of time through all this stuff because it's a pretty big chunk and you're going to spend some time in your groups with it. But in Genesis 11, it's talking about the Tower of Babel. Some of you guys, if you grew up in church, you maybe remember that story, maybe like hearing about the Tower of Babel and being like, man, that's weird. Where basically a bunch of people came together and they wanted to build a great city and a tower that reached the heavens, okay? And so Babel, what it's rooted in is literally gateway to God, okay? Or gateway to gods, right? And when you read it, it's like, okay, what are they really getting after? But what they say in chapter 11 is that they wanted to make a name for themselves. It was about them. It was about their accomplishments. And what's interesting is something that Nate shared, and to me, I get geeked out on this kind of stuff. But when in that passage, when it's talking about what they used to build this tower, it talks about brick and tar, okay? Tar in place of mortar. Well, the tar would be used to protect against water and flooding. See, this is after Adam and Eve jacked everything up, okay? This is after the flood came. This is after God brought Noah and his family safely, okay, through the flood. So it was literally openly mocking God by saying, we will build a city and we will build a tower that even you can't flood. To openly mock God. That's a defining moment where they're making a name for themselves, not for God. And you got to keep in mind, these people, this is God's creation. There's a difference between we're all God's creation. We don't become his children until we say that he's Savior and King in our lives. So when you hear people say, oh, we're all God's children. No, we're not. We're all God's creation, and there's a distinct difference because of the right relationship. That's the game changer. These people that are mocking God openly, he's still loves them the same way he does everybody who loves him. It doesn't change the way he feels about them. He still takes delight in them because he made them. Think about that for a second. That's crazy, but it makes you ask, can you break God's heart? Can you grieve God's heart? I mean, think about it. Like when our hearts are rebellious, or we just want to do our own thing, like, man, maybe it doesn't change the way God feels about us, but I got to believe he's like, man, I would love it if you just felt how much I love you. I think that's something to wrestle with. But God proves available. He proves present. He proves accessible. And through the story of Abram, who became Abraham, and let me read this real quick. I'll read this snippet of it. In Genesis 12, this is what happens literally right after God goes down and confuses their language, because the more unity they find in their rebellion, they will bring about complete destruction upon themselves. But in chapter 12, the first 3 verses, it says, "Then the Lord told Abram, leave your country, your relatives, and your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. I will cause you to become the father of a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and I will make you a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you." So you see a lot of promise. You see tons of promise there. This, you will be blessed to be a blessing. I'm going to do this, 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 and this. I'm going to bless you so that you can then bless others. And you see this sense of promise that God he's entering into covenant relationship with Abram, okay? And there's going to be some other pieces that fall into place with this. But what's amazing to me is this: what you see right after God makes himself available and vulnerable by saying, this is what I will promise you, okay? You see Abraham's vulnerability. You see his availability. Because in the next verse, you know what it says? Verse 4, right after all of this, right after leave your country, your relatives, leave your father's house, go to the land that I will show you. I'm not even going to tell you what it is. You can't plug it into your GPS and I'm telling you how to get there. I'll show you along the way, okay? He's not even telling him where he's going. He's just saying, leave everything. And the next verse in verse 4, it says, so Abram departed as the Lord had instructed him. Obedience. Obedience is a natural response to promise. And so you see God's availability, you see God's vulnerability, and you see Abraham's response by being available, by being vulnerable, by saying, all right, I'll go. No ifs, ands, buts, or whatever. I'll go. And you see that unfold. If you look at in Hebrews 11, it shares more about it, because he leaves literally everything. He leaves everything that he's known, his family, his country, his home, everything, to go somewhere where he doesn't even know what it is. But in chapter 11 of Hebrews, verse 8, 9, and 10, it says, it was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave home and go to another land that God would give him as his inheritance. He went without knowing where he was going. And even when he reached the land God promised him, he lived there by faith, for he was like a foreigner living in a tent. And so did Isaac and Jacob, those are lineage, to whom God gave the same promise. Abraham did this because he was confidently looking forward to a city with eternal foundations, a city designed and built by God. God says, leave everything that you know and trust me. And so by faith, we see that. And here's what I think we can learn from that. Some of us, we want faith, and we say, God, we'll sing songs like, give me faith to trust what you say, that you're good, that your love is great, right? We'll sing songs asking God for faith. We want it so bad. But we've never made ourselves vulnerable before him. See, the prerequisite, in the same way the prerequisite to falling in love is vulnerability, the prerequisite for faith is being available. It's being vulnerable to him And what happens is we'll ask for faith, and we've never made ourselves accessible to him, all of ourselves to him. And I'm not getting at like, no, I don't think any of you have built a Tower of Babel. Maybe you have. Maybe you're not openly giving God the bird by building a Tower of Babel. But we all have rebellious hearts. And even if it's just for a season, we like to be king. We really like to be king. And we'll spend seasons going a different direction. Or maybe we'll do this. We'll make all kinds of plans and we'll say, God, here are my plans. Bless them. And we never take pause to say, God, give me the plans so that I can bless you. There's a big diff. There's a really big difference. Because it's promise and obedience. And that's what he invites us into when we talk about a right relationship with him. And some of you, it creates doubt maybe. I know we've all got doubts, right? You need to know this. It's okay to not have all the answers, and it's okay to have doubts. The kicker is you come to him with them. You make yourself vulnerable by saying, God, I don't know if I believe this. Help me believe this. Because what are you doing? You're making yourself vulnerable before him. You're making yourself available to him. You need to know you don't have to be on your A game all the time. It's okay to not be okay all the time. So, Abraham goes on, and he keeps offering up his life, his future, his everything, okay? And if you read through the rest of the story of Abraham as it goes on through Genesis, you'll see, this guy was old, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and just start calling him Abraham and Sarah, okay? So just so that I'm not switching back and forth, okay? But they're old, okay? And part of God's promise was what? That he's going to fill the earth with their family, right? Well, something's got to happen, all right, for that to happen, all right? And they're old. They're way past childbearing age, all right? And so there's some doubts along the way of okay, God, you serious about this? But God had promises, and he kept those promises. But here you've got Abraham who has all this wealth, all this accumulation of things, because God has kept his end of the covenant. He's kept his promises. But then in chapter 15, you see this covenant established, okay? And we'll come back to that here in a second. But later on in chapter 22, God tests his obedience. And some of you maybe remember the story where he says to take the only son you love, Isaac, take him up on a mountaintop and sacrifice him as a burnt offering. And everybody's like, what on earth? Why would God ever do that? What he's getting at is, are you still vulnerable? Are you still available to me? And it maybe sounds extreme because if you know the story, Abraham was ready to follow. And God said, no, you're still vulnerable. You're still available to me. Here's what happens. Sometimes we will fall in love with the blessings of God and forget who gave them to us. Sometimes we will fall so much in love with how God has been good to us that they become our God. And we make idols of the blessings that God gives us. And we got to ask ourselves, are we still available to God when those things maybe get taken away? Because sometimes God asks us to lay our dreams down, right? Things that we've held on to for a really long time. Sometimes life takes them away because we live in a jacked up, broken world. Are we still going to be available and vulnerable with him? And there's tons more to unpack with all this. There's tons more to unpack that we don't have time for. But some of us, we've maybe fallen in love with God's blessings so much so that we have forgotten who gave them to us, even if it's just for a season. And what happens is sometimes in the seasons that follow that, when we make idols and something happens where somebody does pull our heart out and break it, it shakes our faith. Because what we discover is our faith was found in the blessings, not in the one who blessed. It reveals in those moments where our faith, where our availability, where our vulnerability actually lies. And so you keep going. So through the covenant, and you see that in Genesis 17. Here's the tough part. Nobody likes to talk about, even Ben, but circumcision. And everybody's like, if you even know what it is. And some of you, if you don't know what it is, don't ask me. We'll talk about it later. No. But literally, God says you're to be circumcised. He's 100 years old at this point, okay? Wah, wah, wee, wah, okay? He's 100 years old. And this is the deal, okay? But this is the covenant, and the whole point of it, it was to serve as a reminder. It was to be marked. He was to be marked by God. That's the whole idea of it, is to be marked by God. It was to serve as a reminder that there's no hope in the flesh. You can't build your life on yourself. You can't build your life without God. It just doesn't work. It's saying this availability is only to be given to Him. It's an exclusive availability. Does that make sense? To be marked by God. And so we got to ask ourselves, are there things that we maybe have hung on to that we've not? Are there pieces of our heart that we've not made available to Him? Maybe it's your time. You're very protective of your time. Maybe it's your social calendar. Maybe it's your schooling or a job. Maybe it's your stuff. Maybe it's a relationship. I don't know. I just know we all got corners of our heart that we don't like to let go of because it means we have to trust Him enough to let Him be enough. And what we got to learn is we got to learn how to trust Him enough to let Him be enough because He is enough. And so we got to ask ourselves, are there things that we're hanging on to? Are we willing to offer our past so that He can lead us in our future? Are we willing to offer our future? I mean, that's like when He said to sacrifice Isaac, that was His future. That was His promise. That was the filling the earth with His family. Are you still going to trust Him? Are you still going to have faith in Him that comes from that vulnerability? Are we willing to trust Him enough to let Him be enough, with or without the blessings, with or without all the good stuff? Will we still trust Him enough to let Him be enough? Will we trust Him with the unknown of what may be next? I think for some of us have maybe been hanging on to stuff in our past that is holding us hostage. Things that you've allowed to define you, and it's not the definition of you. And maybe it's your own sin, maybe it's somebody else's, but maybe these things are things that you need to be set free from because you've just held on to them way too long. And for some of us, that's where we find ourselves. We hold ourselves hostage with our past. And maybe God wants to move you forward. Maybe that's what He's doing when He says, draw near to me and I will draw near to you. He is drawing you to Himself. But He knows you're not fit to carry all the junk you're trying to carry. And so some of us, there's some stuff we got to lay down and we got to get rid of because we won't be able to see the future if we're hanging on to what he wants to do with our past. If we're hanging on to all of our hurts, we can't. Some of us, maybe we've celebrated the blessings so much so that there's some things we've hung on to that we've made them idols. Maybe it's a relationship. Who knows? We make idols out of everything because we're wired to worship. We will worship something. I can guarantee you, you will worship something. Ask yourself what or who gets most of your time throughout a day. And I will tell you who you're worshiping. And it's the same battle I walk through all the time. Blessings are good, but they're not God. Blessings are real good, but they're not God. Some of us, we just need to make ourselves available. Maybe we've let go of some things. We just don't know how to move forward. Maybe it's kind of like, well, okay, well, now what? God, are you going to lead me somewhere that I don't really know where it is? And maybe we just need to say, okay, like I'll go. Maybe it's to Romania. Maybe it's across the street. Maybe it's to the campus that you're already on, or maybe it's to a new campus. Maybe it's to a new place of work where God could use you to bring about revival. Why? Because he offers redemption through those who have called him Savior and King. That's what we do. When Jesus is Savior and King, we call people home. And we don't just shout out for them to come home. We go get them. And so maybe that's a step that you got to consider. Or maybe you just need to be marked by God. Now, the good news is this. It's not circumcision anymore, okay? But the reality is maybe we've allowed other things to mark us, and it's time to let God mark us. Let me read this to you. Colossians 2, 9 through 14. I love Colossians. I've been spending a lot of time in Colossians. Just pick it up in verse 9. For in Christ the fullness of God lives in a human body, and you are complete through your union with Christ. He is the Lord over every ruler and authority in the universe. When you came to Christ, you were circumcised, but not by a physical procedure. It was a spiritual procedure, the cutting away of your sinful nature. For you were buried with Christ when you were baptized. And with him you were raised to a new life because you trusted the mighty power of God who raised Christ from the dead. You were dead. You were dead because of your sins and because of your sinful nature was not yet cut away. Then God made you alive with Christ. He forgave all our sins. He canceled the record that contained the charges against us. He took it and destroyed it by nailing it to Christ's cross. And maybe you just need to be marked by God. Maybe that's a step that you've never taken, or you've not known how to take, or you've never really understood it. I'm going to just throw it out there. If baptism is something you got questions about, or you want to know what it means, I'll tell you right now, it means this. You are not Savior or King. See, Jesus is a package deal. Yes, he washes the slate clean, and we want that. But he says, follow me, because I know what's best. And so that's the King part. That's the Lord part. It says, God, take away my past, but I'm going to follow you in the future, and I'm doing it right now in the present. That's what it means to take the step of baptism. And so I would just say this. You got questions about that? If you're wrestling with that, you know how to find me, okay? And at the end of the night, if you want to talk to me about it, cool. If you want to shoot me a text or shoot me an email, whatever, just don't MySpace me, okay? Because I won't get it. Bottom line is this. Choose to be vulnerable. Choose to be available. Because I promise you this, God wants to do something in and through you that will bring about revival. Certain of it. Choose to be vulnerable. Choose to give him that room to move. I'm going to pray, and we're going to break into groups. Some of you, you've never been in a group with us, and so if not, I want you to come up here with me, and I'm going to help divvy you up into some groups, okay? And so the leaders, if you guys can tell me how much room you got, and so we'll get some people in groups, and we'll spend some time unpacking some of this stuff. So you'll just take your chair with you, and then we'll come back and we'll sing some songs to wrap up this night, okay? So let me pray.